Welcome back. Now the details in full. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi marked Labor Day on Saturday with a speech celebrating Egyptian workers as central to the country's economic development, describing them as key partners in Egypt's drive to localize industry, expand job creation and strengthen technical skills. We have the details in this report.
السلام عليكم. تفضلوا استريحوا. تفضلوا.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi witnessed Saturday a ceremony marking Labor Day held at the Suez Steel Company in Suez Governorate. Presidential spokesperson Ambassador Mohammed al-Shenawi stated the celebration opened with reciting verses of the Holy Quran, followed by screening of a documentary about Egyptian workers dubbed Ayedi Karima and another about the Suez Steel Company. Ceremony was attended by the Deputy Prime Minister for Industrial Development and Minister of Industry and Transportation Kamel al-Wazir, Minister of Labour Mohammed Gabron, President of the Egyptian Trade Union Federation Abdel Menaim al-Gamal, and Vice Chairman and Managing Director of the Suez Steel Company Rafi Daw, as well as senior state officials. Shenawi said President al-Sisi watched a presentation of a number of successful private sector startup factories via video conference. He also awarded medals to those honored from various business sectors before inaugurating the second phase of the Suez Steel Company. The President delivered a speech on the occasion of Labor Day, extending greetings to Egyptian workers, describing them as a pillar of the nation's construction and progress path. President al-Sisi said the celebration was not only an annual tradition, but a clear message embodying the state's profound appreciation for the value of work and its firm belief in the role of workers in building development and promoting industrial renaissance. The President pointed out the ceremony was held this year in one of the rising industrial hubs in Suez City, in appreciation of the vibrant development movement witnessed by Suez City via inaugurating a number of mega-national projects. President al-Sisi affirmed the government exerts utmost efforts to provide an encouraging environment for workers through offering developed training programs and constructing technical, industrial and technological universities, in addition to implementing agreements with foreign countries. The President also announced endorsing the new labor law, which is considered a qualitative shift in the march of workers' rights. In his speech, the President gave his directives to first finalize the draft domestic law and conduct national dialogue, second, expand social protection to cover informal employment, third, implement an initiative to develop youth potentials through free grants to study the needs of the labor market, fourth, work to expedite the resolution of labor cases to ensure prompt disbursement of benefits, and fifth, from a permanent committee to monitor the implementation of the National Employment Strategy upon its launch. Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli headed to Gabon to attend the inauguration of President-elect Brice Oligui Nguema. His participation comes on behalf of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi as part of the brotherly ties between Egypt and Gabon, confirming Egypt's keenness on boosting joint cooperation with the African country. Gaza's Civil Defense Agency said Saturday an overnight Israeli strike on the Khan Yunis refugee camp killed at least 19 people, including 3 babies not yet a year old. We have the details. Gaza's Civil Defense Agency said Saturday that an overnight Israeli strike on the Khan Yunis refugee camp killed at least 11 people, including 3 babies up to a year old. On Friday, the Civil Defense Agency said Israeli strikes killed at least 42 people across the war-ravaged territory, which has been under a total Israeli blockade since March the 2nd. Israel resumed its military campaign in the Gaza Strip on March 18th after the collapse of a ceasefire that had largely halted the fighting. A civil defense official said 9 people were killed when an Israeli airstrike hit a home in a refugee camp in central Gaza. Officials added another 6 people were killed in a strike targeting the Al-Masri family home in the northern city of Beit Lahia. Civil Defense Agency reported a strike in Gaza City on a community kitchen that also claimed the lives of 6 more people. The agency said across the Gaza Strip at least 21 other deaths were reported in similar attacks. Health Ministry in Hamas-run Gaza said earlier that at least 2,326 people had been killed since Israel resumed its campaign in Gaza, bringing the overall death toll since the war broke out to 52,418 people. Israel halted aid deliveries to Gaza on March 2nd, days before the collapse of the ceasefire, which had come into effect on January 19th. The United Nations has repeatedly warned of the scale of the humanitarian catastrophe on the ground, with famine again looming. The International Committee of the Red Cross said the humanitarian response in Gaza was on the verge of total collapse. The United States, Israel and representatives of a new international foundation are close to an agreement on how to resume the delivery of humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza without it being controlled by Hamas, citing 2 officials and 1 U.S. source. Meanwhile, Israel's Security Cabinet approved plans for an expanded operation in the Gaza Strip, according to Israeli media, adding to signs that attempts to stop the fighting and return hostages held by Hamas have made no progress. The decision came after comments from both Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and head of the military Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir this week, indicating that Israel has intended to step up the campaign in Gaza. Since the collapse of an earlier ceasefire agreement in March, Israeli troops have been carving out wide buffer zones in Gaza, squeezing the 2.3 million population into an even narrower zone in the center of the enclave and along the coast, while shutting off the entry of aid trucks. The International Court of Justice concluded a public hearing into what Israel's obligations are regarding allowing UN agencies and other relief groups to work in Palestinian territory it occupies. We have the details in this report. The top United Nations Court wraps a week of hearings on what Israel must do to ensure desperately needed humanitarian aid reaches Palestinians in Gaza and the occupied West Bank. Last year, the UN General Assembly asked the International Court of Justice to give an advisory opinion on Israel's legal obligations after the country effectively banned the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, the main provider of aid to Gaza, from operating. The hearings are taking place as the humanitarian aid system in Gaza is nearing collapse and ceasefire efforts remain deadlocked. Israel has blocked the entry of food, fuel, medicine and other humanitarian supplies since March the 2nd. It renewed its bombardment on March 18th, breaking a ceasefire and seizing large parts of the territory. The hearings focus on provision of aid to the Palestinians, but the UN Court's 15 judges could use their advisory opinion to give legal guidance on the powers of the world body. The resolution, sponsored by Norway, seeks the International Criminal Justice's guidance on obligations of Israel in relation to the presence and activities of the UN to ensure and facilitate unhindered provision of urgently needed supplies essential to the survival of the Palestinian civilian population. In separate proceedings last year, the court issued an unprecedented and sweeping condemnation of Israel's rule over the occupied Palestinian territories, finding Israel's presence unlawful and calling for it to end. The ICJ said Israel had no right to sovereignty in territories, was violating international laws against acquiring territory by force, and was impeding Palestinians' right to self-determination.